If you were to ask me what single practice has been the most effective tool for transformation on my own personal growth journey, this would be my answer. A few years ago, I started free writing. And free writing, for those of you who don't know, is a practice where you have a couple things. I like to do it with pen and paper. Some people do it on the computer, but you got a pen and a pad. And the rule is you set a timer, and it's good to set a timer at the beginning. You can kind of let go of it once you get the hang of it. But you set a timer, you say, I'm going to write for, pick a small number at first, 5 minutes, 2 minutes even. And the rule is you write without letting your pen leave the page. Like, yeah, you lift it between words kind of thing, but you don't really take time to think about what it is that you're doing, what it is that you're saying. You're not trying to think of the best word to say next. You're trying to let the word that is right there, ready to come out. And there's, I guess, the suggestion I would offer, the suggestion I was given when I started this practice. I followed a guide called a book called Writing Down to the Bones that really helped me wrap my head around what it is, but it's a simple practice, and I'm explaining everything you need to know about it if you want to try it in this video. So you put your pen on the page, you write until the timer goes off, and then you gradually over time increase the length of time that you are writing for. I want to share, that's the practice. That's it. You can start it right now. You can turn off this video and leave and go and do it. But probably you want to know more about why. And what I thought I would do in this video is share what my experience was doing it, and how it's impacted my life, and some of the kind of assumptions, or I guess theories of mind I have about my own mind for why it has worked. And I imagine they're also applicable to yours. Some of the reasons you might want to try this practice is if you're consumed with overthinking, if you struggle to find words when it's time to speak, if you find yourself obsessing over the words that you use, or if you find yourself with kind of recurring thoughts, that sort of thing. I found it immensely transformative for dealing with all kinds of anxieties and discomforts I had in my inner world. And I'll share why I think that it has been so transformative. The first thing I think, the assumption I want to put on the table for your consideration is that language constructs our sense of reality, our perceived reality. And that's worth considering for two reasons. One, because as a thinker, the words that are moving around in your head are what a lot of thought is made of. People have thoughts that are more visual and tactile and stimulate other ways we have of perceiving the world. But language is really the thing as humans that gives us our sense of reality. If we're going somewhere new, we'll ask somebody questions about what it's like there. Or we'll look up something online, and if we can't find pictures, we'll read about what it's like there. If we're trying to understand what any of the experiences we can have in this life are like, we'll often do it through either looking for a story or telling a story to ourselves about what that experience will be. And then we end up in a situation and realize that usually there's a lot more to the experience than words could describe on their own. So language is what we construct our sense of reality from. And language is, I think, one of the reasons why there are so many conflicts and debates and political controversies over the use of language, is because we innately recognize that, language matters, that language has a way of shaping reality for people, and especially for children. And it makes sense to me why it is so controversial, and why it is at the root of so many political conflicts. So, but it's also true at the personal level. It's it's certainly true at the personal level. And I think that's what this practice bears out. I found myself in a position 3-4 years ago where I kind of woke up one day and realized that so many of the thoughts in my head, so many of the words coming out of my mouth, just didn't correspond to how I really perceived things, to how I wanted to be in the world. And I felt kind of blessed with the perspective that I began to see myself, how others might see me when I saw the kind of conditioned words and sentences that were coming out of my mouth. And, this probably came through a series of conflicts and conversations I was having where it's like, wow, I really, I won't share the details of them, but I went through a divorce. I went through leaving a place that I used to work, and really had to come to grips with the fact that the way I wished to be perceived was different than the way people were perceiving me. And part of that had to do with the words that I chose. But part of it also had to do with the fact that I don't think I was very good at articulating what mattered most to me. I don't think I was very good at articulating why it mattered. And that's kind of when the free writing practice became a significant practice for me, a daily practice. So I started doing it with the 5-minute timer each morning, and it was hard. It was really challenging at first because, the practice is what the practice is. You let your mind pour out on the page. And in the beginning, it was a mix of like, those are the words that are coming out, and like trying to quickly think of something better and realizing that's not what the practice is about. The practice is about letting the words come out and not going back to them. Like just having the peace that you can develop over time with this practice that like, you kind of have to like, it's almost like, if you've ever left a house for a period of time and knowing there's nobody in the house, maybe you turn off the water at the source so that there's no flooding. And it was kind of as if, kind of what happens when you get back to that house after a month or several months away, is that the pipes don't just sit there and not accumulate some kind of sediment. I don't know what's actually happening, but what happens when you turn back on the pipes is there's like air shooting out, there's brown stuff coming out of your taps. You flush the toilet and brown water comes through where the clean water usually comes through from. And you don't want to drink the water for a while, and you sort of just run the taps, you turn all the taps on and, wait some time until the water is clean again. And that's kind of how it works with free writing, with the exception is that most people who haven't done this practice before don't have a sense of what it's like, or at least as an adult, don't have a sense of what it's like to just write or speak freely. And I think kids aren't necessarily always the greatest writers, but most of them, if they can talk, have at least a chunk of time and at least a few contexts in which they're just kind of going to say whatever's on their mind. And we lose that as adults because we learn there's certain things we shouldn't say. We learn there's certain things that we might get judged for if we say out loud. And my philosophy and what I've observed in most people is that what gets suppressed eventually gets expressed somehow. So if you're worried about like, I've got these dark thoughts, or what will people think of, if I write it down, somebody might discover it. And I think that's just something you have to figure out a way. Maybe you burn the paper that you're free writing on after you free write on it. Or maybe after a few kicks around the can, after a few rounds of free writing, then you realize that it's highly unlikely that anybody's going to be interested in what it is you're writing about. That's been my experience. I've free written, again, for years. And for the most part, I've done it in cafes and I've done it in homes that I've lived in. Nobody's that interested in what it is you're writing. That's probably, if you need a safety reassurance, or a reassurance that your writing is probably safe. Know that. Most people won't ask you about it. So where I was at when I started free writing was having had this realization, for the most part, having had this realization that I wasn't able to articulate the values that I had. I wasn't able to articulate the vision that I had for the life I wanted, for the world I wanted, for, if I was in a workplace, for how I thought things should be going in the workplace. And I found myself getting frustrated that other people didn't understand what I wasn't fully capable of expressing. And I didn't have the words for what I wanted. I felt a bit like a child, when a child is throwing a tantrum. I didn't have the words to express what I wanted, but I knew I didn't like a lot of things the way they were. And that included a lot of stuff that was really only involving me, that was only about my personal life and my personal journey. And this practice really, over time, eventually it hit a point where there was no longer any thought involved. In the beginning, I would sort of approach my notepad at the beginning of the day, and I'd think, I'm going to write about this today. And I would write about that. And then eventually I realized that, hey, I could just sit down, open up my notepad, or I often wrote on a digital tablet, and I didn't have to have much in order to get going. One of the practices I used was to start with gratitude. So I would have 3 things that I was grateful for. It's sometimes helpful to have a list of questions to kind of get you going in the morning. And gratitude is certainly a way of changing the way you perceive reality, for sure. If you force yourself to sit down and think of things that you are genuinely grateful for, not things you think you should be grateful for, but things you're actually grateful for. And eventually it was just, I could sit down, and no matter what I was writing, no matter where my pen started, usually the first sentence is a bit of a throwaway, right? Like it's not, you're not going to pump out the Gettysburg Address each time you sit down to write. And then it got to the point where it was like, I would do this for most of the morning if I didn't have anywhere else to be. For a while, I had a delivery job that started at 12 p.m. Each day. So I could spend the whole morning writing, and then work from 12 to 8. And I had this like tremendous sense of like, something is shifting, something is changing. And then eventually it poured over into being able to speak freely. And I think that was when it was about a year ago that I started to realize that I didn't have to sit down and write anymore, that I could work through what I was working through with my voice in a way that I hadn't ever been able to do freely before. I've done lots of podcasts, lots of voiceover work. I found myself in recording studios, just trying to get everything just right. And, I would record something that was spoken freely, but then I would go back and edit it until it sounded just right. And then I realized, well, there's an energetic feeling that's lost when you do that. And now speaking is, not that I struggled with speaking in conversations prior to this, but I did struggle with making presentations that weren't kind of like fully cooked and staying in tune with whoever it was that I was speaking with. So that's been a huge transformation. The goal I had, I guess, beginning was being able to articulate a worldview that was different than the one I had been conditioned to believe. I don't know about you, but I would often find myself in conversations where it felt to me like there was a script for the conversation. Like I didn't need to think too hard about what to say. If I was in a conversation with somebody in a workplace, or with somebody maybe that I don't know terribly well in my extended family, or whomever, it felt like it was very obvious what I could say in those conversations, this pre-free writing. It was very obvious what I could say in those conversations that would get me by. Like I could almost turn my brain on autopilot. But there was a part of me that knew that like I wasn't showing up. Like my true self, my unique self was not showing up in those conversations. And that it was only me that could ever make that happen. That there was never going to be an invitation from the people in my life to show up more or shine more of my uniqueness into the conversation. And the thought occurred to me that like, I don't want it the other way around. Like I wouldn't be thrilled to learn that people were participating in conversations with me, following an unconscious script. And you can sense it when they are. I mean, like we know when we're in a conversation where somebody's just, putting the next line of the socially acceptable script in. And I don't know how I would have gotten there were it not for practices like free writing and then free speaking that really helped me recognize. And I would go back and reread a lot of my writing over time. I would usually give it some space and I would go back and reread it. And I would see inconsistencies in my value system. And a big part of what I think the personal development, spiritual growth, spiritual evolution process is in coming into alignment with all of your parts. And I think that one of the easiest ways to think of this is to think of it as, what's your head saying, what's your heart saying, and what's your gut saying? And are those things in alignment? Or another way of thinking it is like, are your words in alignment with your actions? And when you commit to something, are you following through? Or are you doing other things that are sort of like a committed person wouldn't do those things in a world where they sort of were really aligned with either a principle or an action they said they were going to embody or express. So I found that through reading this, it was sort of like, some idealism comes through, but I think idealism is often just like, it's our true nature, true self. On days when things were hard, on days when I wasn't feeling well, or content in the relationships in my life, I would write about those things. And in writing about those things, I would come to see, I think it's helpful to have that license to free write, to just like write whatever is coming out. And sometimes I'm frustrated with this person because, but eventually you realize that like, well, they're not going to read that, but I am going to read that. And once you express that frustration on the page, it kind of opens up the space for you to look in. The page kind of serves as a mirror. So you're kind of looking in the mirror by writing out whatever it is that comes up when you contemplate the question. It's like, okay, what could I be missing here? Or is there something I'm not seeing here? And once you start writing out what your values are, maybe days previous, you've written out some of your ideals and values and notes about how you want to show up. And then a situation frustrates you and you realize you're out of alignment. I think the mere act of doing this will trigger the process by which you bring yourself into alignment. I think we have some control over how long that it can take to come into alignment. We can delay it, it would seem, for as long as we want to. But by naming the ways in which we are showing up in inconsistent ways, that brings an opportunity for us to come into alignment. So free writing has just been like an incredibly powerful process for that. I'm conscious of the time, and Well, this is a 21-minute video already, so I think I'm going to leave it here for today. And if this is interesting, we'll pick up free writing as another topic that we explore at some point in the future. Let me know if you free write in the comments, if you're going to try free writing, or if you're interested in being a part of a supported group for free writing. Let me know in the comments. That's something I'm considering doing. The way that you can, I guess, stay in touch about that, I also run a newsletter where if you sign up via email, then you will be able to know about that kind of offering and other offerings that I'm making in the future. You can subscribe to the newsletter by going to, there'll be a link in the description, but you can also subscribe on Substack. It's called The Other Side of Complexity, and you can punch the URL in. It's markrobertcoffin.substack.com. That'll also get you there. Every week, on Fridays, I share an email that's just like some content that I've enjoyed over the course of the week. It's a mix of content about the practices and topics we explore on this channel, and like music I'm interested in, because I love music and that's how I can share it. So subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Hey, I've got a challenge for you. If you made it to the end of that video, that means you must be at least in some way interested in free writing. And the best thing to do right now is just to take 5 minutes and sit down and try it out one time. There's no time like the present, so stop what you're doing, pick up a pen and the pad, open up a text editor on your laptop, and start writing. If you want to do that, if you want to take my challenge, you can click on the link here, or somewhere around here. I've made a 5-minute video for you that will help you mark the time. And at the end of it, if you complete the task, I'll be there to congratulate you.